Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever and whenever you may be on this great big bubble of ours. I am Tarkan, Manifestation Lab, back with another video. How's everyone doing? Even if you told me I couldn't hear you. You know, I was asked recently in a comment whether I believed in the afterlife. Now, this is interesting. It's an interesting question. And I remember answering, yes, of course, definitely. But really, I didn't offer any further explanation than that. I didn't really dive any deeper into the topic. And I thought about this recently because I was hanging out with some people and somebody said to me, you know, that they had experienced an apparition, I suppose you want to say, of their cat, or it was a dream of their cat after their cat had passed away. And they said, you know, I definitely believe in an afterlife based on that. And then she told me, well, I don't know if that's true for humans, but it certainly is true for cats. As if somehow cats have an afterlife, but humans don't. But it caused me to think about my own experiences. It caused me to revisit that question from the comment. And I thought, you know, we might actually discuss this today and talk about something a little bit different on this channel. There are, you know, I have much broader interests than just how to manifest your ex back. And you probably do as well, and you should have broader interests than simply that. But that's maybe a topic for another video. But I do want to touch on this a little bit because, you know, we get so trapped in our identities, our little human identities. And I know I've peppered some of my previous videos, or a lot of my previous videos, with comments about, you know, you choose your experience before you come in. There's the higher self that is still focused in non-physical. And, you know, that's really what I'm talking about when I'm speaking about things like focused in physical and focused in non-physical. And of course, I'm borrowing those terms from Abraham Hicks. If you're not familiar with Abraham Hicks, check out Abraham Hicks. They talk a lot about this idea of being focused in the physical, being focused in the non-physical. And the general idea and concept is that as you focus yourself into your little human identity here on planet Earth, in this physical world, this three-dimensional world where you can see things, taste things, touch things, hear things, that there's a larger part of you, that larger, more universal, broader part of you that remains focused in the non-physical. And that sort of becomes like your guide. You want to call it your guardian angel. You want to call it your guide. People call it spirit guide. People call it God. People call it the universe. People call it all kinds of things, right? And throughout history, people have named this thing all kinds of things. But the idea really here is that there is a broader self, right? That is the universal self that has the broad perspective that is constantly communicating with us. And yes, that is, so to speak, on the other side. As people like to use those kinds of terms when they talk about, you know, life on Earth versus life outside of Earth, after life, life before life, right? There's a lot of topics on this. A lot of books have been written on this, a lot of videos, a lot of babbling has been done on this topic. And there are very, very many different kinds of terms to use. It can get confusing, but really it all boils down to the same thing. You are a larger thing. You're not just Tarkan, you're not just Bill and Joe and Sarah and Tiffany out there bouncing around your little world, right? Everything you know is yesterday, today, and tomorrow, this linear timeline, the physical world that we see that is so convincing as being real and the only kind of physical reality there is. You come from a larger self, right? A larger, universal, timeless self that operates without time and without space, right? Outside of time and space, so to speak, all right? And that at some point, and this is the idea in a lot of spiritual traditions, is that you decided to focus yourself. Now notice the terminology here, because this is kind of important. You focused yourself into a small, tiny aspect of something, right? This physical reality, this life that you understand as being so real right now, this identity that you carry around with yourself right now. And we all do this. We carry around these human identities, right? I am a man. I am a woman. I am this thing. I am a doctor. I am a whatever it is. We think of these things as being who we actually are at our essence, but at our essence, we're something much larger than that. Now, I asked you to notice the term that I was using, focusing into, because that's really what it comes down to. There's a small fraction, let's say, of that larger self of yours that decided to focus, this change the channel for just a little bit, to channel and focus into this frequency that we call earth reality and earth life, physical reality, to focus itself and channel itself into this body identity, right? So that it can live and create and experience itself through this perspective, all right? So that's one real small aspect of what I believe in personally, how I see things in terms of life after death and the physical versus the non-physical, life versus death, and all that kind of stuff. All right. So this is something I wanted to touch upon. There's a lot of stuff out there. Like I said, one of the things that I came to this understanding, and I really started to study this phenomenon of near-death experiences many, many years ago. I want to say many years ago, about 16 years ago, something like that. And I was having some personal events happening in my family where somebody was passing, and I was dealing a lot with this concept of what that meant to me. And I was a much younger person at the time, and I really hadn't thought that much about it. And I was trying to understand, and I was seeking and searching, and I came to a sort of an understanding of wanting to find out what other people thought about this. And this is when I stumbled on the whole phenomenon of near-death experiences, or NDEs. If you're familiar with this, or even if you're not, go check it out. I remember at the time there was a website called, I think it was near-death.org or something like that, where somebody had taken all the near-death experiences and accounts of people that they could find and put them all on a website. And everything they could find through history and through religious and spiritual texts, and everything was kind of there on this website. I don't know if the website still exists or if it exists in the format that I remember it in, but I remember at the time that it really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And then people having these experiences, very similar experiences, coming from all walks of life, all age groups, all genders and races, all class backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, from many different countries, many different religious backgrounds that they had grown up in, all had these similar experiences when they had their near-death experiences. However that came about, they had car accidents, they died on the operating table, a vast number of ways that people can unfocus or focus out of 3D reality, human reality. But then at some point they were either, told, hey, you're not done yet, or you set out to do something, you should go finish it. Or they personally decided, I'm going to go back. And they did. And they had retained a memory of that experience, right? And it changed them forever. For some people, it was very difficult to come back to three-dimensional reality and deal with the limiting kind of sense that you have when you are in physical form, right? Because once you taste that again, the idea being, and a lot of people from having these experiences would recount having a memory of their pre-birth, right, in their current identity. So they would remember choosing this particular life, choosing the certain set of circumstances of this particular life, choosing certain challenges that they would meet in this particular life. And then once you kind of come into that, you then have the option to change and create something different out of those circumstances, right? So this is where our manifesting stuff comes in, where the idea of that we are creators on the cutting edge, on the leading edge here, as Abraham Hicks likes to say, that we kind of do decide to come in, because in non-physical reality, there's no time and space, there's no delays, everything is kind of created instantly. So to come into a physical reality that seems limiting compared to that, and then to learn to create through those limitations, was something that we all set out to do. Now, I like to kind of use the analogy of, people go, well, why would we do that, right? If we're in this wonderful, blissful environment, no time and space and everything we think of manifests instantly, why would we come into this limiting environment where everything seems so slow and dense and heavy? Well, why do people jump out of airplanes for a thrill? Why do people go mountain climbing? Why do people take on these challenges that to some other people might seem, why are you doing that? I would never, base jump into a cave or off the Empire State Building. But people out there who like the thrill of the ride, they like the challenge, they like the adrenaline of it. They like to limit themselves so that they can overcome those limitations. This is something that's actually a very human thing, but it's something that we do on a spiritual soul level as well. All right. So I like to think of it as we are all just a bunch of souls skydiving. Right? Or white water rafting, or whatever it is that you do. You know, we go scuba diving. Let's go under the water and see what things are like down there. Right? So that's a very interesting way to think about it. It's something that's always helped me to kind of intellectualize that, because we always, you know, because of our little nut and our monkey mind, we want to intellectualize things. We want to kind of wrap our minds around them to understand them, because if you think about it too much, after a while you go a little crazy, because you can understand this from a spiritual, pure consciousness level, from the non-physical level. It all makes perfect sense, and you don't really need any explanations, right? From non-physical, you're like, well, I just am. I don't need to have any meaning for it. There's no limitations really to my existence, but we come into a limited environment and this limited kind of body that we know is going to eventually wither away, or whatever happens to it. You know, the idea being that we detach ourselves from this as being our soul identity. But of course, most people don't. Most people see this as their soul identity, and I think that causes a lot of suffering for people. But the point, going back to the point of why do we do this? And it really is, you know, to say that life must have some meaning, I think is, it's not necessarily accurate that life must have some meaning. Sometimes the meaning is just, there is no meaning, really, except the meaning that you apply to something, the meaning that you assign to any given thing in your life, right? Any given thing about yourself. And this is where your creator part comes in, because you get to choose how you respond to things, how you observe things, how you frame things for yourself, okay? Because from broader perspective, like I said, there is none of that resistance. And this is why I talk often about listening to your inner voice, listening to your emotional guidance system. Because, you know, the moment you formulate some kind of a desire, hey, I want more money, I want better health, I want better friends, I want this relationship. From that moment, your inner being, your higher being, that part of you that is still focused in non-physical, understands exactly how it needs to vibrate, at what frequency it needs to exist in order to have that thing. It has it immediately. Now it's going to guide you through your monkey mind self towards that thing. And it does so in a number of ways. Okay. People always talk about the synchronicities and the signs and the numbers. And I was thinking about this, then I heard that song on the radio and it was talking exactly about that thing. So understand that all of that is you, your larger self, communicating with your little self. Okay. Guiding you towards what you want, where you want to go. All right. When you think about it in those terms, it can be very simple. Okay. But you know, you have that other aspect of it. People want proof, right? They need to know. I want to see it, which is part of the reason I think that people are so adamant about having the physical thing they desire manifest. They're so adamant about it. I got to be able to see it. That's why they look for signs. That's why they look for things, evidence in the physical world, because they're so convinced. Because when you enter into the physical reality, you deliberately, perhaps it's deliberately, I've heard accounts that it's also just a natural byproduct of coming into physical existence, that you forget. There's a veil of forgetfulness that kind of comes over you, so that you can actually be fully immersed in this identity and this environment, and it makes it real. Think of this as being like the most intricate, deep, all-encompassing kind of role-playing game in the universe, right? Think of it as a gaming environment. You know, there's a funny thing that people do. If you look on YouTube, there's these NPC videos, and people talk about NPCs, which are, if you're familiar with role-playing games, they're non-player characters. They're kind of the characters that the AI populates the gaming environment with. It's a funny thing. If you ever want to explore that a little bit further, do some searching on YouTube on NPC videos. You know, the idea is the person cutting you off in traffic, or that person over there just doing weird things. They're kind of, you know, just part of the computer game, right? The gaming environment. They're not really there, but they're there for everything to be a more authentic experience, right? Anyway, it's kind of a funny little aside, but there are a number of ways that you can look at this, right? There's a number of analogies that you can use, especially now in our sort of digital world, our computer world, our gaming world. We can understand things much easier through those kinds of analogies, right? Hey, I'm on a holodeck, right, on the USS Enterprise. So I am out in space somewhere having a little holodeck experience, right, where I go back to whatever, 17th century France, or, you know, if you're a fan of Star Trek The Next Generation, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're not, you should be, and go check it out. You'll understand what the holodeck is. But, you know, I wanted to dive a little bit into this because obviously this is a topic that I can go on for hours and hours. There are many, many kind of intricate, you know, parts to this. But I urge you to do your own research into this, because me doing my research all those years ago into especially the NDEs, the near-death experiences, really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And it kind of helped me to understand my place in my own life as a creator of my own life and as a creator of my own experiences. You know, it's a journey that's ongoing, but it's a journey that kind of began back then about 15, 16 years ago that has, you know, gradually taken me further and further down that road and opened my eyes in a myriad of ways to many different possibilities. Because once you understand that you're larger than what you think you are right now, that goes a long way to helping you understand how powerful you are. Because if you can accept the idea that you created your own life and experiences and identity, then you're still doing that, right? It becomes a lot easier for you to have agency over your experience, because now you can say, oh, I'm not the victim of my circumstances. I'm not the victim of some external angry being and they're with a personality disorder and their whim, right? It gives you so much more freedom to act, to create, to dream, all right, and to really see yourself as something much more powerful, much more capable than just some little monkey running around eating, drinking, shitting, whatever it is, all right? You know, these things that monkeys do, all right? And there's nothing wrong with that, you know, monkeys are great, but you're not just a monkey, all right? I'll tell you a little story, because I think this video isn't going to have a lot of direction, really. I want to touch on this subject some more. It'd be interesting to actually speak to people who have had NDEs on this channel. And if you have had one of those, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear about it. And let us know your experiences. It would be very fascinating. But I'll tell you a little personal story of mine about the late 90s. I want to say 1997, something like that. Things are blurry from those days. But I was living in Southern California at the time. I had an apartment near the freeway. It was kind of right next to the freeway. And I had a job at the time. I don't remember what I was doing exactly, but I was coming home from work, driving in rush hour traffic in the afternoon. I was very close to my house. And I had, at the time, kind of a watering hole, a little local watering hole that I would go to. That was kind of a little pub environment. And I was one of the regulars there, and I knew all the other regulars there. So it's a place where I would meet a lot of friends. We'd go, we'd have a few beers, we'd talk. It's kind of a coming together. A lot of locals in that town would go to this place. So we all sort of knew each other, right? But as I was standing, I was sitting in my car at a red light. I looked over the sidewalk and I noticed I recognized somebody that I knew. And I thought, well, look at that. There's Joel. Right? That was so many years ago now. Jeez. I said, look, there's Joel. That's interesting. And I remember thinking that it was strange that I would see him there because, first of all, he lived all the way across town. So I never really saw him in my part of town. Now, he was a person that also went to that local watering hole. So I knew Joel. I knew his fiance at the time. I knew a lot of friends that knew Joel. Everybody knew him. We knew him as a motorcycle enthusiast. So he was wearing his motorcycle jacket, his leather jacket. But I remember also thinking that it was strange that he didn't have his helmet with him. And these are just thoughts coming through my mind, you know. And I thought, well, that's odd. And it's odd that he's here. And it's also odd that he looked a little dazed. He looked a little confused. He was kind of just sort of walking down the sidewalk. And all of this happened very briefly within the span of a few seconds. And suddenly the light turned green and I had to, give my attention back to driving, and traffic kept moving. So I didn't look again. I didn't turn my head again to see where Joel was going or that he was still there. I just remember thinking, well, that's strange. Well, I'll see him later and I'll ask him about it. And I went home, I had some dinner, I took a shower, I got dressed, and I decided to go down to the little watering hole that evening. And I'd forgotten all about Joel. I'd forgotten all about seeing him. I went down there and I saw another friend of ours who was there. And actually, she didn't mention anything at first. We just kind of, we're shooting it and talking about our day. And then suddenly she goes, "Hey, did you hear what happened to Joel?" I said, "No. What happened to Joel? Is he okay?" She said, "No, he's dead. He died." So she told me the whole story of the night before. He had been celebrating with some friends, a promotion he had gotten at work. All of his motorcycle buddies were at a bar. They were doing tequila shots and things like that. Now, somebody in the group had decided to take everybody's motorcycle keys and to take everybody's helmet so that people wouldn't get on their motorcycles and ride home drunk. So they would call cabs and go home that way. Now, the speculation is that Joel must have had an extra key in his pocket, something like that. That he was, at that point everyone got into cabs. No one had really paid attention whether he did, and apparently he didn't. So at about 3 a.m. or something, quite inebriated, he got on his motorcycle without his helmet. And remember how I told you that I noticed it was strange that he didn't have his helmet with him. Got on the freeway the wrong way, was going 90 miles an hour against traffic and hit a semi and was dead. Now this had happened, I had seen him about 4 or 5 in the afternoon that day, and he had already been dead by the time I saw him, and I didn't know. So you see here, first I was shocked to hear that he was dead, but later, it was about an hour or two later that I remembered I had seen him. And I thought, well, this is weird, and at the time I had no real concept of what I was explaining to you, that I've got helicopters flying, that, I had already studied this idea of near-death experiences, idea of life after death and all that. At the time, I wasn't really thinking about that stuff, but I remember it gave me chills because I was convinced, and I still am, that I'd seen a ghost, so to speak, right? Or I'd seen some imprint of his energy still lingering, because remember, I was living right next to the freeway, and he had actually passed right there, that section of freeway where I was living. I remember how I was thinking it was strange that he was on that part of town, on my side of town, because he lived all the way across town at the time. So all these things kind of came together in my head, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. I saw him. I saw his soul, or I saw some imprint of his energy kind of floating around. Now, whatever the meaning of that is, was he confused? Was he not aware that he was dead yet? Was there some part of him that was still stuck imprinted in our sort of time-space kind of fabric? That's something that I'll let you decide, right? This isn't something where I'm trying to convince you of anything, or I'm saying, hey, your specific beliefs are wrong, or your religious beliefs are wrong. This is just me talking about my personal experience. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who have similar experiences. I find this topic very fascinating. I find it very interesting. And to answer the question again to that commenter, that viewer who commented and asked me, absolutely, I believe in the afterlife. But I don't believe in it in the sense of the afterlife. I think it's a life that's concurrent. And we talk, and this is something I can touch a little more deeply on in another topic, because it ties into the idea of quantum realities and parallel realities, is that, if time really isn't linear, we talk about past lives and reincarnation. That's another fascinating topic. This is going to be a whole series. This could be a whole series, guys, that we can just explore together if you want, that I find very interesting. But the idea being, hey, if there is no linear time, then all these sort of what we call past lives are actually concurrent lives. There's so many different ways to look at this, right? But that there is a part of him that was still alive, a part of him in another reality that never had the accident, a part of him in another reality that was never born into Joel's body, another part of him that is, the larger part was in non-physical, but there's a little part of him that remained enmeshed in this kind of weird imprint on our time-space reality here, that I saw and witnessed, and for whatever reason I plugged into that day. Maybe because I was in close proximity to where this had happened. Maybe his soul, if you will, his spirit understood that, knew me, recognized me, somehow appeared to me for some reason or another under the circumstances and considering the circumstances at the time. But suffice it to say, it's experiences like that and everything that I've studied and looked at over the years in regards to this topic that absolutely have convinced me that there is no doubt about it in my mind, that there is a quote afterlife. but I want to call it the other life, the other reality, actually your original reality, all right? The one that you're still in. It's almost like you're asleep there and you've decided to dream about being this person that you are right now and to have the most vivid dream, real feeling dream that you could possibly have. And then this thing we call death is just waking up. So, on that note, me babbling about this topic for 25 minutes. Thank you for indulging me. I hope that's been interesting for you. I want to try different things from time to time, and this is certainly very different, and I find it fascinating. So I will talk about this topic again in the future. If you liked it, please hit like, hit subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. You can find coaching information down below in the description box. You can leave a comment. Actually, please do. If you have had a near-death experience or you have experiences like the one I described having, please let me know. It'd be fascinating. It'd be fascinating maybe to even have you, who knows, maybe interview you about that, right? Because I think it's interesting to hear other people's stories. So thanks again for watching, guys. This is Tarkan signing off, Manifestation Lab. Until next time, happy manifesting and bye-bye.